Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the economic decisions you supported not only failed to deliver on their promises, but they're now harming your daily life. This is the harsh reality many Americans are facing today as Donald Trump's economic policies, particularly his tariffs, come into full effect. A recent survey conducted by WalletHub reveals that 74% of Americans believe that Trump's economic policies are going to raise the prices of the goods they purchase regularly and exacerbate inflation. This revelation marks a significant shift in public sentiment, with a growing number of voters now looking back on their decision to support Trump with regret and disillusionment. But how did we get here? What happened between the moment of voting for Trump and now, when his economic agenda seems to be driving the U.S. economy into a financial quagmire? For years, Trump's America First agenda seemed like a promising solution to the country's economic struggles. However, as inflation rises, prices climb, and American families find themselves paying more for everyday essentials, it's becoming clear that the economic plan promised by Trump has been less of a solution and more of a recipe for disaster. The warning signs were there from the beginning. Economists and financial experts across the country predicted that Trump's policies, especially his trade tariffs, would lead to higher costs for consumers and ultimately harm the American economy. But many voters, swayed by Trump's populist rhetoric and promises of bringing jobs back to the U.S., either ignored or misunderstood these warnings. Today, however, the consequences of those decisions are undeniable, and Americans are now waking up to the reality of the economic damage. In this video, we'll break down the implications of Trump's economic policies, explore the reasons why so many Americans are now regretting their support, and discuss what needs to be done to avoid further financial ruin. We'll dive into the consequences of his tariffs, the skyrocketing inflation, and the role of experts who had warned us all along. By the end of this video, you'll have a better understanding of why 74% of Americans are now convinced that Trump's policies are leading them toward financial disaster. The surprising polling data and growing public concern. This week's survey from WalletHub paints a grim picture of the future under Trump's economic policies. According to the poll, 74% of Americans believe that Trump's tariffs and trade policies will cause prices to rise and inflation to worsen. This is a massive majority, 3 out of every 4 people in the country, who fear the economic consequences of the current administration's approach. For years, Trump promised that his America First policies would lead to economic prosperity, create jobs, and rebuild the middle class. But now, those promises are starting to feel like empty rhetoric as Americans experience the real-world consequences of these policies. From grocery bills to gas prices, the costs of everyday life are climbing. In particular, tariffs on imported goods from countries like China have directly led to higher prices on consumer products. This is not a surprise to economists who had long warned that tariffs would increase costs for American consumers. The tariffs, which were a cornerstone of Trump's trade strategy, were intended to force foreign nations into renegotiating trade deals that were seen as unfair to the United States. The logic behind the tariffs was simple. If you raise the cost of imported goods, American consumers will start buying domestic products instead. However, this approach had some major flaws. First, not all American products are competitive in price or quality compared to foreign-made goods. Second, tariffs didn't just hit foreign manufacturers. They also raised the prices of raw materials, components, and products that American companies rely on. As a result, businesses were forced to raise prices on their goods, and the consumers who felt the brunt of those price hikes were everyday Americans. The problem isn't just limited to specific industries. The effect of tariffs has rippled through the entire economy, leading to inflationary pressures that are felt across the board. Whether it's a trip to the grocery store or a visit to the car dealership, Americans are finding that their money doesn't stretch as far as it used to. This rise in the cost of living has caused many to reassess their support for Trump's economic policies. Inflation, the hidden cost of Trump's tariffs. Inflation is the silent enemy that creeps into every corner of the economy, subtly eroding the purchasing power of the dollar. Under Trump's presidency, inflation has been steadily rising, and the most recent figures indicate that it's set to climb even higher. While inflation is a natural part of any economy, the specific actions of the Trump administration, particularly his tariffs on imported goods, have played a significant role in exacerbating the issue. The basic economics behind inflation are simple. When the supply of goods decreases or the cost of producing them increases, prices rise. Trump's tariffs are effectively reducing the supply of affordable goods in the U.S. by making imported products more expensive. This means American consumers are either forced to pay higher prices for the same products or look to pricier domestic alternatives. The result? Inflation increases and families find themselves paying more for the same items. Take the example of grocery prices. Many everyday staples, like fresh produce, meat, and packaged goods, have seen significant price increases in the wake of Trump's trade policies. This is largely because tariffs on imported goods have driven up the cost of everything from agricultural products to household items. While these increases might seem small at first glance, they add up over time, creating an overall inflationary environment where families have to spend more to meet their basic needs. For a large portion of the population, these incremental increases in costs have a significant impact on their financial well-being. The buyer's remorse. Voters are feeling the impact of their choices. One of the most striking aspects of this shift in public opinion is the growing sense of buyer's remorse among Trump's former supporters. While the polls of 2016 and 2020 showed significant enthusiasm for Trump's economic promises, the reality of his presidency is causing many voters to rethink their decisions. The very voters who once cheered his tariffs and tough stance on trade are now lamenting their choices as they watch their wallets shrink. This sense of regret isn't limited to a few isolated groups. It's a widespread sentiment across the political spectrum. Many of the people who voted for Trump in 2016 and 2020 now feel betrayed by the very policies they once supported. In interviews with these voters, a common theme emerges. They didn't fully grasp the economic implications of Trump's policies when they cast their ballots. They were swayed by his promises of job creation, economic revitalization, and a stronger America. What they didn't anticipate was the impact these policies would have on their daily lives, especially when it came to rising prices and higher inflation. One voter, who supported Trump in 2016, put it bluntly, "I thought things would be better under him. But now, I can barely afford the basics. I didn't know the cost would be this high." These regrets are echoed across the country as people begin to see the long-term effects of Trump's economic decisions. While Trump might have promised to bring jobs back to America, many voters are finding that the economic costs of his tariffs far outweigh any potential benefits. The experts were right. Economists warned about the risks. What makes the current economic situation even more frustrating for many Americans is that these consequences were entirely predictable. Economists, both liberal and conservative, warned from the very beginning that Trump's economic policies, particularly his tariffs, would lead to higher prices for consumers and stifle economic growth. These warnings were not based on political ideology, but on well-established economic principles. Despite these warnings, Trump pressed forward with his tariff agenda, dismissing the advice of experts and instead focusing on his populist rhetoric. Economists who questioned his plans were often dismissed as part of the establishment or as voices of the old guard, but their predictions are now proving to be accurate. Today, as inflation rises and the cost of living increases, it's clear that Trump's economic policies have had the very effect that experts predicted. They've made life harder for everyday Americans. This realization is particularly hard for those who, in 2016 and 2020, trusted Trump's promises over the warnings of economists. Many of these voters are now left to face the consequences of decisions they made without fully understanding the economic ramifications. They are beginning to see that the promises of lower prices and a booming economy were not only unrealistic but also dangerous for their financial futures. Mitt Romney's warning, a call for accountability. In a rare moment of alignment with the critics of Donald Trump, Republican Senator Mitt Romney recently reminded American voters that they cannot now complain about the consequences of Trump's policies. Romney, who has been a vocal critic of Trump for years, pointed out that Trump was upfront about his tariffs and trade policies from the very beginning. These policies were not hidden, and economists were clear about the risks. The voters who supported Trump knew what they were getting into. They simply chose to ignore the experts. Romney's remarks are a stark reminder of the responsibility voters have when it comes to making informed decisions. Trump's economic agenda was always clear, and the consequences were always foreseeable. The problem was never a lack of information, it was a lack of attention. Romney's point is simple. If voters didn't heed the warnings of experts, they have no right to complain when the policies they supported result in higher prices and inflation. The polling data from WalletHub serves as a wake-up call to all Americans. Trump's economic policies are pushing the U.S. toward a financial disaster. 74% of Americans now acknowledge the detrimental effects of his tariffs and trade policies. Prices are rising, inflation is soaring, and many voters are regretting their support for Trump. But while it's easy to look back and feel frustrated about past decisions, the important thing now is to learn from this experience. The damage done by these policies is not irreparable, but it will require thoughtful action, a return to expert-driven economic strategies, and a willingness to correct course. We can't afford to ignore the lessons of the past. The next time we vote, it's crucial that we pay attention to the warnings of economists and experts, not just the promises of politicians. For those who are now feeling the consequences of their decisions, it's important to understand that while the past can't be changed, the future can still be shaped. The key lies in making informed choices moving forward, choices based on economic realities, not political rhetoric. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth analysis on the latest political and economic issues. We'll continue to keep you informed about what's happening and what it means for the future of our country.